we're going to learn a little bit about the idea of music. To explain a little what music is, we've learned this whole week about music. Let's go a little bit deeper and to bring everything together. So in general, there's a quote from Rabbi Bechaya Ibn Pekuda, which is the different Rabbi Bechaya, the earlier Rabbi Bechaya that we learned today. And he quotes and says that Dibur is the kulmas halev, that speech is the quill, is the pen of the heart. And upon that, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, says that Negina, song, music, is the kulmas hanefesh, is the quill of the soul. That we can give ourselves over through music in a way and through song in a way that we cannot do through anything else. So in general, what is the effects of music or the koyach hanegina, the power of song upon a person, how it can move us and how it could induce different states? This we talked about in various times and written about it a few times in inner rhythms and sound and vibration. How music has the power to calm us, even maybe to cause a person to be sleepy. Different Gemaras, the Gemara in Eruvin, Kuf Dalet talks about using sound to induce like a meditative, quiet state to fall asleep. Music also can be used to arouse someone, to awaken someone up, to, like the Rambam speaks about the shofar, that the sound of the shofar is Urim Mishnaschem, that the sound of the shofar actually arouses us. Music was used in battle, in war. Music was used and continues to be used at weddings. The Gemara in Ksuvis Manvav talks about music being used at funerals, and Ma'ir Cotton talks about it as well. Music is used to induce a prophetic state, or like the Avodas HaKodesh says, that not only does it induce a prophetic state, but when the prophecy actually enters into the state of prophecy. He speaks about this in Chelek HaTachlis, whether it stops the music, or music is the language of the spirit, the language of the soul, the language of prophecy. Or music can bring a person down all the way to idol worship, like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Avodas Chachamim. So music can be used in various different ways. And today we'll try to understand a little bit what births music, what creates the context through which music arises. So let's begin with the Kuzri. So the Kuzri, Sefira Kuzri writes that the art of music is a very important art. And it was taken by us, it was a very serious art. It's one of the 7 wisdoms of the world. It's a very serious art. And he gives an analogy and he says that it was such an important art that there was an entire tribe of Israel, the whole Shevet Levi, that they were dedicated specifically to the art of music. That's what they did. They practiced music. If you look in the Rambam in Hilchos Kli HaMikdash, the Rambam Hilchos Kli HaMikdash Perek Gimel writes that Zera Levi kulim moved Avodas HaMikdash. The entire tribe of Levi, the Levites, the entire tribe of Levi, were separated to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And what was their service? So in Halacha Beis, and Avodah Shalem, the service of the Levi of this entire tribe, Shoyashayim Beis HaMikdash, they would watch. They were the watchmaker, the protectors of the Beis HaMikdash. And they were also in charge of opening the doors and closing the doors. In other words, they were the gatekeepers. So they were there to protect the Beis HaMikdash. And also the second thing, so besides that they were shomrim, they're also meshoirim. Besides being shoyarim, or connected to doors and gates, they were also meshoirim. And Chazal play on this word, meshoyer, shashir, this idea of like, if they did the different work, if the person that's supposed to be a gatekeeper becomes a singer, but there was people that watched the gate and people that, in the tribe of Levi, that were the singers. And Ezu Shira, Amasei Mashir, what is this type of song? And when did they sing the song? They sang the song when they brought the offerings, the public offerings, and that's when they sang. Now, who sings? Now, in the orchestra in this band, there were 2 dimensions to the band. One was the singers, and so there were 12 singers. They're the ones that sang. And then, in addition to them, there was also a an orchestra, a band. So this is what the Rambam writes. The main idea of the shira, of the singing in the Beis HaMikdash, the main construct of that singing was actually to sing with the lips. And besides the addition to the singers that would sing with their mouths, there were also those who played instruments. And the instruments that were played were the various instruments that we learned, the navel, the chid, the chalil, the kinder, chatzotzers. But who played these instruments? Anybody technically, a Levi, and even Yisraelim, and even regular Jews that were not part of the tribe of Levi. Anyone could play. In other words, the idea of the Levi is connected specifically to the shira that's connected to the peh, the shira that's connected to the mouth. So we see that the two main purposes of this tribe of Levi, the two main avodas of this tribe of Levi, was either to be protectors of the Beis HaMikdash, and even though they were protecting, it wasn't a protection for thieves, like the Rambam writes in Perek Ches, at the end of Hilchos Bechira, that it's ein shmira ela kavod, that the idea of the protection is for the honor of the Beis HaMikdash, because it's different if you have a home or a palace that has protectors, that has watchmen, that has guards versus doesn't have guards. So there's something about the idea of the tribe of Levi connected to a shomer. A shomer is a protector and a singer. Now, generally, the tribe of Levi is connected to Gvura. In the Sefira, Levi is connected to the Sefira of Gvura. And simply with their shomerim and their sha'arim, they're protectors of the doors, and they close and open the doors and they're protected as the Beis HaMikdash, it's clearly connected to an act of severity, like they're closing the door, they're opening the door, and they're saying, you can come in, you can come out. So the tribe of Levi is connected energetically to the idea of Gevura. So now the question becomes, how is Negina, how is song, and specifically the song that's connected to the Shiras HaLevim, the song of the Levim that was Ika Shir B'Peh, the main idea of the Shir was with the mouth, how is this particularly connected song to Gevura? You would think if you thought for a second, you would think that music is an expression of love and of giving and of thankfulness. You think it's an expansive expression. And here we're saying that the root of the Negina, the root of music, and the root of song is connected to some type of Gevura. So there's a Gemara, the Gemara at the end of Saita, which we also have learned, it says, Udna the Shama Zimra Ta'aker. The Gemara says that after the Churban Bayis, after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, after the destruction of the Mikdash, it was ruled and said that the ear that listens to music should be uprooted. This was a general prohibition of listening to music across the board. We'll talk a little bit later how that eventually slowly receded, but the strict prohibition. But the language is ta'aker, is uprooted. So the Maharal in Netzach Yisrael Perek Chaf Gimel writes that the reason why the sages use the word ta'aker, the idea of uprooting, because it also represents the idea of midas hadin. V'hashir miyuchas lemidas hadin. This is what the Maharal writes, and this is the language. That the shir, song, or singing songs, is attributed to the midah, to the attribute of din. And that's exactly what we learned today. Also from the Pardes Umoinim, Mishar Chav Gimel Yud Aleph, the Pardes writes, B'Shem HaZohar, that music is connected to the smile, connected to the left side, which is din. Right side is chesed, left side is din. Music is connected to din. Interestingly enough, the Radak, Reb David Kimchi, one of the early Rishonim, has a book called Sefira HaShoshim. Sefira HaShoshim is like a book that discusses the roots of different words, what's the origin of words. And the Radak writes, Sefira HaShoshim, that the word shir, song, is connected to the lashon, to the language of shoyer. Shoyer is a bull, which is an animal of gevura, rav tuas b'koyach shoyer. So somehow this is connected to power, to smoil, to the left side, to din, to Levi. So we're trying to understand, a little unpack this idea. What does it mean that it's connected to that? Okay, let's start, as we always try, to go a little bit into the Gemara, and then from there go a little bit more deeper. So the Gemara, there's a Mishnah, some of you learned, the Mishnah in Erchen Daf Yud. So what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, the Mishnah tells us that that B'shnei Moser Yoim, there were 12 days that the Chalil Maka Lifnei Mizbeach. There were 12 days that the Chalil would play in front of the Mizbeach. Then the Mishnah continues and says, Va'avdei koyanim hoyu. And those who played the Chalil, those who played this type of flute, were not actually priests themselves, but they were the servants of priests. That's the words of Rameir. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Mishpachas Beis Pargas Beis Safra Ma'amim Hoyu. No, that they were actually, they were a mishpacha from this family. And he argues that they were, in fact, they were actually just regular Levim. They weren't kind of. So the Gemara says that what is the argument between these opinions? If we're allowed that not the Kohanim, not the Levim, but even Avodim, even the servants could play this Chalil. So the Gemara says that maybe this is an argument if Ika Shir B'Peh, maybe the main objective to sing in the Beis HaMikdash was with their mouths. The Levi had to sing with his mouth, not with a vessel, not with an instrument. And the Kli L'Besumikala, and the only reason why they also use instruments in the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, was to add to this sound, to sweeten the sound, and therefore anyone can play the sounds, the kalim, anyone can play the instruments, or Ikashira is also Bekli. If the main idea of the shir is also to sing with the vessels, with the instruments, and therefore it has to be specifically a Levi. The Gemara then says that's not the argument, it's argument Mal Yuchsin or not, but it seems to be that everyone says that Ikashira is Bepeh. Then the main idea of the shira is actually with the mouth. And in fact, this is what the Rambam rules. But the Rambam, when he talks about the avodah of the Levi, like we said in Perek Gimel, he said, Halacha Gimel, he says, B'chol yom shira, we don't say shira only with the mouth. She'ika shira she'avoidasa b'peh. The main idea of the shira is to say it with the Levi, to sing it with his mouth, not the instrument. That's one halacha. However, the Rambam writes halacha and halacha vav, which seems to be a contradiction to this halacha. So the first halacha says that anyone can play the instrument. If you're miyuchas, if you know your family history, then you can play in the Beis HaMikdash. You can play any instruments. You know how to play an instrument? You can join the band. Because the Ika Shira is Bepeh. The main idea of the Shira is actually with the mouth, and therefore anyone else can play. The Levi sings with his mouth, anyone else can play the instruments. There's another Gemara, the Gemara in Sukkah Nun Aleph, where the Gemara talks about the Chalil, if this Chalil, this little flute, is Doicha Shabbos or not. And the Gemara seems to say that if we say that it's, that Ika Shira, the main idea of the shir is bepeh, with the mouth, then you don't need the Chalil. So if it's a Shabbos and you can't play the Chalil, don't play the Chalil. But if you say the Ika Shira, the main idea of the Shira is actually with the instrument, so even on Shabbos, you have to play the instrument. We just said that the Rambam rules that Ika Shira, the main idea of the Shira is actually what? With the mouth, which means that it comes Shabbos, you won't be able to play the Chalil. However, the Rambam Halacha Vav writes, Chalil zeh doicha Shabbos. This Chalil, this playing of this Chalil, of this flute, is doicha Shabbos. Why? They Chalil shakar, because it's a Chalil of the carbon, and therefore you're allowed to play this Chalil. Who plays the Chalil? Anyone plays the Chalil. It doesn't have to be the Levi. Anyone that's playing the Chalil can play the Chalil, and it's doicha Shabbos, which seems to contradict the Rambam earlier that says that it has to be specifically Ika Shir is with that. Now, this is a question that's asked by many Achronim, and let's understand this a little bit more, a little bit more in depth. So we say like this. The shir that's connected to the mouth, which is the avodah of the Levi, or the service of the Levi, that's specifically connected to the mouth. However, in addition to the idea, and Ika Shir is bepeh, that's what the Rambam will rule. Also, the question is, how come the Rambam rules that the Chalil is doicha Shabbos? because the Rambam, and this is maybe what the Rambam is writing, he writes, Chalil shel carbon. He calls it a chalil of the offering. In other words, it's part of the offering. Part of the offering, not the avodah of the Levi. Part of the offering itself, when you bring a carbon, is there has to be music that's being played. And it doesn't matter who plays it, because it's not avodah in the Levi that the Levi has to sing. The Levi has to sing the shares of the Levi. The shares has to be a separate thing that he has to sing. In addition to him singing, or the Leviim singing, there must be music when the carbon is being offered. Why? Why? Okay, so we can understand, we can say that that's the halacha, but why? So this is what the Rambam will rule. Well, why is that the ruling? So if you look in the Gemara again back in Erchin, which we're not going to get into in long detail, we can ask the question of what is the root that we do have to sing the shira, that there's an idea that the Levi has to sing in the Beis HaMikdash. So the first source is V'sheirish B'Shem Hashem Alikav, and that he serves with the name of Hashem. And the Gemara says that's called a shira, that he's singing with the name of Hashem, that's considered a shira, and that's what the Rambam brings that halacha. There's other reasons the Gemara brings, because for example, because you have to serve with joy. So it's possible that the reason for the singing and playing of the music in the Beis HaMikdash has to do with creating a joyful place. In the Rishonim themselves, in the early commentators, we see that there's an argument between some of or not an argument, but they give different reasons why it was so important that they played shira, bepeh. They sang with their mouths, and there was musical instruments being played in the Beis HaMikdash. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim writes that the simple reason for that is because music and singing creates a very positive ambiance. To create a positive ambiance in the Beis HaMikdash, when you come to the Beis HaMikdash, it should smell nicely. And this is what the Rambam also says, the idea of burning the incense is to drown out the smell of the slaughtered meat, to create a positive odor, to create a place that smells nicely and looks nicely and has a positive experience when you enter that space. So it has to do with the cheftza, the object of the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, we play music. That's one reason. In Sefira Mevakesh, the Sefer that was written by Shem Tov Ibn Paklaria, he writes that it has to do with the Gavra, that the reason why in the Beis HaMikdash the music was being played was so the person should be aroused to tshuva. The person that's bringing the offering should be aroused to a state of tshuva. And this is similar to what the Chinuch in Mitzvah Shin Pei Daled 385 writes, that the idea of playing music in the Beis HaMikdash was for the Gavra, for the person to have proper intention. So just like Chatzotzros in general, the blowing of the shofar, the blowing of a Chatzotzros, of the trumpets, creates harmony, creates unity, creates focusedness. So the same thing also, when you came into the Beis HaMikdash and the music was being played, you focus on what's your objective. It's clear, this is what I'm doing here, I'm bringing an offering. The Alter Rebbe, according to Chassidus, explains a little bit different this idea, maybe a little bit more ba'omek. And he says like this, that Kol Bali Ashir, Yotzim B'Shir V'Nechnasim B'Shir. There's a Mishnah in Behema Yotze, in Shabbos, it says, it's talking about the different objects that animals are allowed to go out in public with. They're afraid that a person's going to take it off and they're going to hold it and walk with it, etc. So the Mishnah says that Kol Bali Ashir, anyone that wears a shear, which is a collar, is Yotzim B'Shir V'Nechnasim B'Shir, can go with a shear and leave with a shear. The shear is actually a collar, but the shear also means music. So the Alter Rebbe explains, look at the Torah, that the idea of Bali Ashir means Kol Bali Ashir, anyone that is a Yotzim V'Nichnas, anyone that's movement. Whenever there's a possibility of movement, whenever there has to be movement and transitions occurs is assisted by music. Music allows for a type of bittul, what he calls, a type of nullification of what is, for allow a person to move into a place of what could become. So let's say one person is stuck in one place, another person is stuck in the other place. We want to get these two people together. So the idea of the playing of music creates a certain nullification of the exaggerated sense of I, for example, and therefore a person can move into another space. So the idea of a carbon, let's go back to the idea of the carbon of the offering, is now, it's a new reason. So there's the cheftza, there's a mitzvah of There's the understanding that we're playing music to enhance the space of the Beis Hamikdash. There's an idea that we're playing music in the Beis Hamikdash to enhance the experience of the gavra of the person of the Beis Hamikdash. And now the third reason will be it's actually connected to the actual idea of the carbon, that the carbon is an offering, a carbon like the Sefer Boyer says that a carbon comes from the Lashon Kiruv, it's drawing up, it's drawing closer. So the experience of the carbon, of the offering, in order for this experience to have an expiration, a higher dimension, a higher movement upwards, there has to be music. And certainly, like we spoke, it could be maybe even music is played to soothe the animal, to get the animal into a more relaxed state. But the point of the music is for a type of elevation. Ultimately, what does the music create? The music creates a type of yichud. So music is allows for the movement of one person towards the other and two people towards each other. The idea where we're taking two that are separate and we're slowly moving them together. That's the idea what's brought down from the Friedrich Rebbe, the idea of the makifim, that the music creates a space that both can enter to create a type of yichud between two. So we'll talk a little bit more about music, but let's move to another topic. We'll get back to this. So the essential what we're saying is that music creates a harmony between people that are listening to the music. Now we're also during this time period, we're in Sefira, and so we all know we're in the month of Iyar, and tomorrow night, God willing, will be like Boimer. Now in the month of Iyar, there's a very interesting halacha that the Ramah or Moshe Isserlish in Kuf Chavav and Even Ezra 126 and Even Ezra writes that those halachas of Even Ezra unfortunately talk about the Nusach HaGet, V'diktuk talks about the liturgy, not the liturgy, the language of how you write, God forbid two people that are divorcing each other. So how do you write the name of the month of Iyar? How is Iyar spelled? Right? How is the month Iyar spelled? It's not in the Torah. Iyar is not a month that's recorded in the Torah. The name Iyar, it's a later name. That's all in Bavel. We adopted it from the Akkadians, from the Babylonians. So how is this month spelled in Hebrew? So the Ramah writes that Iyar is spelled Aleph Yud Yud Resh. Two Yuds. Aleph Yud Yud Resh. It's also Ani Hashem Revacha, but Aleph Yud Yud Resh. Now, what happens if you wrote Iyar with one Yud by mistake in a get? In a bill of divorce, so he says it's possible, but b'shas adchak you can use it. That generally you shouldn't write the word Iyar with one. So therefore he says, because of this, it appears that because there's a suffix, there's a little bit of doubt for certain people how you write the name Iyar with two Yuds or one Yud. There are more rules that there's a custom not to divorce during the month of Iyar. That people shouldn't divorce in the month of Iyar. People shouldn't divorce b'chlal. But if God forbid there's a situation, God forbid there's abuse or other situations that are not bearable, and people really need to go through a divorce, shouldn't divorce in the month of Iyar. So the oimik of that, the depth of that, is not just because it's a question of how you spell Iyar with a one Yud or two Yuds, but the depth of that is because Iyar is connected to the idea of chibur, of unification. The month of Iyar is connected, according to the Sefer Yitzir, to the letter Vav. Vav is a chibur. So since the month is connected to chibur, we don't want to create any type of separation. And this we'll understand a little bit deeper. So the Torah writes, Shulchan Aruch in Ar Chaim writes, it's not brought down in the Rambam, the Rif, or the Gemara, but the Torah writes, and that's in Ar Chaim Tov Tzadik Gimel, and that's the way the Halacha, the Mechaber rules, that in this time period, during the times of the Sefira, the custom is not to marry, not to take haircuts. This already comes from the Goyim, and why not? Because this has to do with the death of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, the students of 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, which God willing we'll talk about a little tomorrow. And because Lenago covers Ebetzed, they didn't have respect for each other, therefore they passed on in this period of time. And sort of for like a type of mourning, we don't get married. So here's something very interesting. On one hand, you say, what do we say? On one hand, we say that during this time period, you don't divorce, right? Which means that you don't want to create periods, separation. On the other hand, we don't get married. But if the whole point is if the whole reason why we mourn the death of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva is because because they didn't have respect for each other, so they didn't have good, positive interpersonal relationships, you would think that the tikkun for that, the specific tikkun, rectification of that thing, what would we do? You would think, what would be the tikkun to specifically get married? Now, of course, if a person has to get married, and there's different halachas, but the general custom is we don't get married. So why no divorce but no marriage? To understand this a little bit, what's the idea of Sefira? And it's connected to music. So very quickly, the idea of Sefira, the time of Sefira, is not about separation, but it's a time about individuation. Lenogo kavazeh means that they didn't respect each other's boundaries. So what is the avodah? What is a person working through the time of Sefira? In time of Sefira, we're trying to develop the tzuras adam, the development into the proper stature of a person. So Sefira is not a time of gerushin, separation, that we're separated from each other, but it's more a time of bedidus, not precious. Bedidus means the development of the self, the individuation of self, and not about marriage, which can be sometimes the loss of self. So this is what Sefira is. So therefore, we don't divorce during this time period because it's not about separation, but also you don't marry because sometimes marriage causes the collapse of individuation and it causes a melding of two into one. And maybe this is the idea of music. What is music? What's the root of the word music? What does music mean? And according to Hebrew, of course, we're going to use English word and understand it in Hebrew. So there's a sefer called by Yehuda Moscato, which is by an Italian famous rabbi that lived in the 1500s, 1530s. The early Rishonim, the early Achronim, he wrote a pirush on the Kuzi called Yehuda. And he writes that the word music comes from the word mezeg, like al yechser ha-mezeg. That mezeg and music are similar. What it means is that music means a balance between sounds. You have different opposite sounds. Let's say you have, I'm not going to talk about the musical letter for the musicians, but you have, let's say, a harsher sound, like a harsher beat, and then you have a lighter sound of flute. And somehow when you combine these two almost contrasting sounds, when they seem to contrast with each other, but when you join them together, you create this harmonious sound from both these sounds together. So that music is a type of mezeg. When there's a mezeg, when there's a flowing between these two types of qualities, or two or three or 10, it creates this beautiful symphony of sound. That's what music is. So therefore, we don't play music during Sefira because it's not about mezeg. It's about individuation. Only a Lag B'Omer. We'll get to Lag B'Omer. We'll talk about Lag B'Omer. But generally, it's about finding the self in the experience, not about the mezeg. In the Torah itself, and sometimes this is a Messiah already that we have for many tzaddikim, and Tzaddik brings it down, the Bnei Sascha brings it down, the Gra brings it down, the Chaver brings it down, that there's an idea that if you want to understand something, you have to see the first time that idea is explained in the Torah. Where do we find music in the Torah? So in the Torah itself, in the beginning of Bereshis, towards the end of the first Parshas Bereshis, it talks about the birth of different children. There's Ada at Sila, and then it says like this: "Vatelad Ada as Yuval, who haya Avi Yoshev Oyel Mikna." That there was a birth of one child, and this child was the father of all those who dwelled in tents and the shepherds. So we have the first time the idea of a shepherd appears in the Torah. The second pasuk says, "V'gam v'shem achiv Yuval," and his brother's name was Yuval. He was one that the father of all the players of the lyre and the pipe or all these other ancient instruments. So we have the idea of music. We have shepherd and music. And then the third son, Betzila, Kabu Yavel Stulakayan, and he was Loitish Kol Chayrish Nechoishes Ubarzel. And he was the one who forged all types of objects from copper and from iron. So we have a shepherd, a musician, and a man of iron maker. Let's just say we'll call this person a warrior, someone that's making instruments of war or instruments of other type of instruments. So music is sort of sandwiched in between. So in certain Chassidish Svarim, like it's brought down in Lekut Maran, it's in the Samach Gimel, it's brought down in Imre Tal from the Levitover, and others so they can bring it down, that Shetekef, Shahaya Ba'olam Roya Mikna, right when there was in the world the possibility for a shepherd, immediately Hoya Kli Zemer. That the shepherd, the idea of a nomadic person sitting in the meadows and the fields alone, that produced a possibility for music. Music came from that place of shepherding. When the shepherd was no longer, dug his trenches in the ground and he was able to be free in the open meadows and be with himself alone, bedidus, like Avram, like Yitzhak, like Yaakov, like David, like Moshe, all the Royat Sign, like all the others. When he was a shepherd alone in the field, that's when music was being produced. However, you could also look at the reverse, and a lot of the early Achronim, like we mentioned, the Futzis Yehuda, and Abarbanel of the Pasuk, and Abarbanel, interestingly, lived the exact same time period in almost the same location after he exiled from Spain, in Italy with the Futzis Yehuda, the Kuzi Hashenu, the Venito, and many later Achronim bring down, that we can actually draw the connection the opposite way also. That music is somehow produced through the sounds of the copper and iron worker. He's banging out his vessels. He's cranking out these swords or shields or whatever he's creating, and that's hitting a hammer on the metal, and that creates a sound. His brother picks up that sound and creates music from those sounds. So we see that if we take both these commentaries together, the music is sort of created in a space between a shepherd, which is the Isha Chesed, the man of kindness and openness and expansiveness, the gentle, artistic person, the Hevel of the world. The Hevels of the world are like the wind people, the people that are floating through life, which represents a certain type of quality. That's where music is produced. On the other hand, it's also very much produced through almost the opposite contrast idea, which is a person that is very much connected to battle, to war, to instruments of destruction. And it's interesting that David HaMelech, who is Ne'im Zmiris Yisrael, we consider the greatest composer of song and music of Klal Yisrael, he was both a Royat Sign, he was actually both a shepherd, which is the first I mentioned, and he was also Ish Damim. He was also a man, he was a warrior. Hashem tells David HaMelech that you cannot build a base of English because Yedechem Leim Dam, because your hands are filled with blood. In other words, he was a Ish Milchama. So he was a man of battle, of a shield, and of a sword, and he was also a man of total peace and shepherding his son. So the place of music is sort of born in that in-between space, almost the space of the tension between the war and the peace. It's between the despair and the hope, between the violence and the love, and the sharpness and the gentleness. And the music is created by an artistic person in that state where they're feeling really down, but they're also full of hope. If they're totally in despair, if they pull to the place where they're totally in despair, they can't produce anything. If they're totally with no tension and no anxiety, I don't want to say negative anxiety, but no strive and no gvura, music is not either produced. And this is also very similar to the actual instruments. The way instruments are made is either a toif, which is made with cowhide, or with other types of hide, which you have to pull very strong. You have to kill the animal, or the animal has to be dead in some form, and you have to pull on it very strongly, like almost like violently to tighten it, and then to bang on it. And then, or if you play instruments of string instruments, so you have to tighten the strings into a very strong level of really, really tight, but you can't tighten it too strong, because if you tighten too strong, those sounds emit. So there has to be like some give, some space where you can use the delicacy of your hands and the strumming of your hands, which creates the instrument, the sounds of the music. So it's sort of in that place that's between very tight and very harsh and very raw, and the place of very open and very transparent and very expansive. In that place is where the music is produced. Music is produced. If a person is too down or too up, that's music is not produced in that place. It's like the instruments itself. And this is also between your past and your future. And one of the great shiros, one of the great songs that we have in the Torah, the greatest shir that we have in the Torah is Az Yasher Moshe, the shir is Moshe. So the shir of Moshe is, on one hand, Az Yasher means then Moshe sang, which is past tense, but Az in Hebrew actually also means future tense. Like Az Yimal Ischayk Pinu, or Az Yemer Vagoyim. Az means future tense. And the Maral on the pasuk of Az Yasher actually says that the Az is the Aleph that's Roichav al Zayin. It's the one, like the sense of transcendence, or that is riding on the seven, on the multiplicity of creation. And the Az is the unity between the Aleph, the sense of transcendence and upwardness and expansiveness, that's sort of moving into the place of the Zayin. It's like the scales of an octave. It's the entire scale of the 1 into the 7, which is that place where music is produced. And that's why it could be both. It could be the past and it could be the future. And interestingly, that we learned also in the Perek Shira that the animal that the shira of the animal that says the Az Yasher Moshe and Esau is actually the shoyer. The shoyer is the one that says Az Yasher Moshe. So there's something about that place. And this is what the music is. The context of the music is being produced by the Levi, by the place of din, by form. It's very rigid. It's very orderly. Everything is structured, and in that place, we're able to break out and to open up and to expand and move into the Aleph. But it's not just the pure Aleph; it's the Aleph and the Zayin, the Zayin and the Aleph in this octave of 8 scales. It's always moving back and forth. And that's where the music is being produced, where it's the tension of these two things and the unity between these two things. In the Tikkun Zohar, in Tikkun Chaf Aleph, and it's explained, and Alter Rebbe explains this in Amar Ad Marazak and Maharazal, and in Torah Oyer, Bereshis, and Sha'ar Tshuva of the Middle Rebbe, and Amar Lamed Hey. It's a big topic, that there are 4 types of shir. There's 4 types of songs. Something that the Zohar calls a shir stam, which is what we'll call an ordinary song. An ordinary song means a song that's very simple. It's very ordinary. It moves you, but it moves you in a very one-dimensional place. Let's say it's like a little dutkala that gets you happy, and you sing it and you feel like a little happy. Okay, that's like one song. It's called a shir stam. Then there's something that's called a shir meruba. A shir meruba means like a squared or a quartet, something that has 4 sides. And what does that mean, a shir meruba? Shir meruba means when the music actually is multidimensional. That it's not just simple. It's not like, okay, you're listening to music and you feel high, you feel happy. You listen to music, all of a sudden you feel sad or you feel introspective. It actually moves you. There's different tenuas, there's different movements in the song. It gets you a little high, a little low, a little deep, a little outward. You're moving with the sounds of the music, and you're feeling different types of movement within yourself. This is already a more evolved, more sophisticated form of music, which is called a shir meruba. And it's 4 because it's connected to das, and das is 4, chacham bina das, chesed das 4. But that's called a shir meruba in general. Then there's a more higher form of music, a higher production of music, which is called a shir kafel. A shir kafel means that not only is it moving you in different directions, and this is really the oimek of what we get to, but it's moving you in different directions simultaneously. You're actually feeling depth and joy and resolve and hope and this and movement and stillness all simultaneously. And it moves everything within you. Even opposites come colliding together and coalescing together as one experience. This is the depth of a type of sound that's produced from like the shir David, the idea of the shir Levim, from the place of the tension of the gevura, from the place of the shir, maybe the Ika shir b'karbon, that's like the offering is an animal and very visceral and war-like, and it's feeling like the intensity and that also the release, and also like, okay, I'm very calm and I'm moving in a very different space. This is a shir kafel. And then there's a higher level of shir, which is a 4th level of shir, which seems like a shir stam. It seems like it's just a very simple song, but it's the highest of the high. That's called a shir pashat. It's a simple song. A simple song means it appears in the surface, you can hear it, and someone that doesn't have depth of character, does not appreciate the music, says, okay, I don't get it. It seems to be a very simple song, but if you really listen deeply and you have the ears to actually understand the music, you'll see that it's moving you in so many different directions and doing so simultaneously. This is the highest level. This is the highest level of shir. It's a place that creates the total unity and the total simultaneous movements of the paradox of existence. And this is the highest level of yichud. And this is what we're trying to achieve in music, and what music is produced and how we have to connect with music. And like we learned in the Gemara in Erechim, the Gemara says that now we have music that is produced on the 7 levels, and we're tapping into the 8th level, the Oz, the Aleph, and the Zion. But eventually we'll reach a place where it'll be Shmoina Nimin, we'll have a place of the 8 Nimin, which means there'll be a total yichud between these paradox. And then eventually we'll come to a place where it'll be Shir Chadash. Shir Chadash, now we call a Shira. So there's the Tosfos in Kufta Zayin and Psachim, and it's a Medrash. We learned that Shira is a feminine shir. It's a type of song that's feminine. Why is it feminine? Because feminine, just like a Isha is a Muberes, then your Ledes, a Chayzer Muberes, the Medrash says, just like a woman or a female in general is pregnant, then gives birth, then becomes pregnant and then gives birth, which means there's a tension and a release and a birth, and then a tension, a release, and a birth, and this is a constant process. Which that's the way music, the way we understand music, that's the way music is created. It's like literally the birthing of sound through the tension, and then all of a sudden a beautiful child is born from that place of the tension and the contraction. So the same thing also in the process is continuous, because movement is constantly continuous and we're constantly creating music. There'll come a time which we don't understand. This is beyond paradoxical to us. There'll come a time when shira, when song will actually be shir, singularity or masculinity, where it will still be a shir. There'll still be movement and there'll still be opposites, and yet there won't be opposites itself as well, because it'll just be a singularity. So the Eibusher should help that this should be the last time that we're talking about music. And Be'ez Hashem, we should all be zoicha to experience the true music that will be played with the coming of Mashiach in Pe'er V'Yameinu. Yeah.
Amazing. If people have questions.
Yeah, we can take a few questions because that's what we usually do. So let's take a few questions.
Okay. Maybe I'll turn off the live first.
Yeah.